Thank you. So if you don't know a lot about Live DMA, well, you can go on our website, www.live-dma.eu, or you can also follow us on our socials, such as Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. But just in short words, Live DMA is a European network. We're gathering live music associations in 17 countries. Live DMA is a non-profit organization. We're an association that exists for 10 years now, and we represent now over 3,800 music venues, clubs, and festivals all over Europe. Next slide, please. So what we do in Live DMA is that we implement transnational activities to improve the conditions of live music in Europe. And we represent your voice to European and international organizations such as the European Parliament, the European Commission, or again, the World Health Organization and the other European representatives of the music sector. So Live DMA's goal with MusicAIRE is to implement EU funding opportunities adapted to the needs of the small and medium-sized live music scenes. And we also work to make these grants accessible to you through this kind of info sessions, but also through more simplified administrative process. Next slide, please. So I'm also the vice president of the European Music Council, also called EMC. EMC is another European network representing the whole music sector, from live music to music schools, music orchestras, choirs, and so on. And I'm here today to introduce you to a specific call for the music sector in Europe, which is named MusicAIRE. So today we're going to analyze the main guidelines and understand how you can apply to such funding. There will be another session probably by the end of February, but it depends when the call will be published. If you want to apply with a project during the second session, we will try to solve more like technical or practical questions. But as for today, you also have the chat, so do not hesitate to raise your questions during this session. I will answer all of them. I think we have about 1 hour together, so really don't hesitate to send all your questions in the chat. There's no stupid questions, and I'm pretty sure that others will be really glad that you're there asking your questions, because they probably have the same questions. So really don't hesitate. Next slide, please. So let's get inside MusicAIRE. And for this, I think it's important to step back for a minute to understand where does MusicAIRE come from. So back in 2016, the European Commission launched a dialogue with the music sector to better understand the needs from the music sector. This was the beginning of what we called Music Moves Europe. So basically, Music Moves Europe is an EU pilot program dedicated to the music sector. Music Moves Europe, which we also call MME, is managed through the Creative Europe program of the European Commission at the moment. From 2017, Music Moves Europe launched some pilot calls to test what could be some support actions for the music sector in Europe. So maybe some of you heard about it. For example, in 2019, there was a call to support the cooperation of small music venues. And then by the end of 2020, when we were, well, we thought at the time that we were in the middle, but actually still at the beginning of the pandemic, the European Commission launched a call called Innovative Support Scheme for a Sustainable Music Ecosystem, with a budget of 2.5 million euros. And this call was addressed to one representative organization from the music sector to then redistribute these grants and test a methodology that could shape the future of the program Music Moves Europe. So it's actually the European Music Council, EMC, that applied and who was selected by the European Commission to implement what is now called MusicAIRE, and with 2 calls for grants that will be published in 2022. So the main objectives and priorities under MusicAIRE were set by the European Commission through the initial call, but the management of the project is operated by the EMC, who is partnering with a Portuguese organization specialized in EU funding, which is called Innova Plus. We can go to the next slide, please. So what are the main objectives of MusicAIRE? Well, the first one is definitely to support a sector, the music sector, that was damaged by the restrictions of the COVID-19 crisis. We have several reports, including one published by Live DMA with our survey, that highlights how much the music sector, and especially the performing sector, the live music sector, were one of the most impacted sector by the crisis. Another point that I mentioned already before is that the objective of such a call is to test and shape what would be the future of Music Moves Europe as an autonomous music program. And then, as cultural policies and therefore music policies are still a national or local competence, but definitely not a European one, the objectives of this program must be in line with other European priorities, such as the Green Deal, which is basically to limit the ecological impact of the sector, the support to digitalization, and the social pillar, which means bringing our sector towards more fairness, inclusion, and gender equality. And as always, with EU funding, what is important to remember is that is the European added value that must be demonstrated. So I'll get back to that later on how you must demonstrate the collaborative or the sharing aspect of your project. And next slide, please. Thank you. So just very brief word on the methodology behind the MusicAIRE call. The calls were drafted based on an online survey launched in September by the EMC to collect some feedback and the needs from the music sector. And then during the autumn, there were 2 think tank sessions with music representatives to bottom up ideas on how should the calls look like. So Live DMA participated in both actions, the survey and the think tank, and we also encourage our members, so national live music associations, to do so. So now there will be a first call released in February, and there will be a second call before the end of 2022, and very probably after the summer. Next slide, please. So when we look at the calendar, wait, I'm just checking the chat at the same time. So yeah, if we look at the calendar, you will have probably around 6 weeks to apply once the call is launched. So this is also why we're having this session right now, so you can get ready, because the time will be quite limited once the call is out. And then there's about 4 weeks for evaluation. So you will get the results about your application quite soon after you applied. The starting dates of the project will be soon then, so probably around May or maybe June, with a duration of the project around 10 or 12 months. So yeah, these deadlines are quite short. They will be confirmed once the call is out, of course. And if you can't make it in this time, keep in mind that there will be a second call. However, there might be also more applicants to the second call, but also maybe more budget. So due to such short deadlines, I think you can imagine that we don't expect you to reinvent the wheel here and to reinvent everything. You don't have to plan a whole new project ID, as it can be for cooperation projects under Creative Europe programs for the ones who are familiar with this funding. Next slide, please. However, MusicAIRE can be a good opportunity to test your project on EU funding and apply to a Creative Europe cooperation project later, next year, for instance. So I believe that you can use MusicAIRE grants to invest or experiment in a pilot project based on an idea that you have and that you don't have the current fund to invest in this new idea. So MusicAIRE can provide this investment. You can boost an existing project maybe that you have and that you need to bring it to the next level. And it's also an opportunity to work on at European level to disseminate the results of a successful project maybe that you've done locally and that you'd like to share to inspire or to duplicate similar initiatives on a more global level. So I'll get back to this later when talking about eligibility, but you don't have to set up a partnership to apply. It's a mono-beneficiary application, but you will still have to prove the European added value of your project. I'm quite insisting on this point, but it's important. And I think another underlying objective of MusicAIRE is definitely to support also small music actors who usually don't access EU grants and to take their first steps in European funding opportunities. So I think you truly have the ideas, and the capacity to apply to these calls. These calls are actually made for you, so don't hesitate to try to apply with your project. Next slide, please. So there will be 3 levels of grant agreements, 15,000 euros, 30,000 euros, or 55,000 euros. And the idea is to grant between 15 and 20 projects under this call. And there will be they will probably grant more projects with the second call. I won't give much more details about the financial aspects today. Because we will focus on that during our second session. But what is important to know with all the EU projects is that they are co-financed projects. It means that you usually have to provide some of own funding capacity on top of the grant that you request. So for instance, if it's 90% co-funding, it means that you have to provide 10% on your own. So if you require a grant of 55,000 euros, you have to approximately bring 6,000 on the top for a total amount of a project of 60,000 euros. Most of the EU programs are now lump sum. I'll get back to that at the very end of this presentation. And EU funding also usually have pre-financing rules. So they don't give you all the money at the beginning. They just give a part of the budget at the beginning and the rest is paid at the end of the project once you've wrote your report. So it's important to keep this in mind just to make sure you have enough cash flow to run the project. Next slide, please. I'm just checking the chat. Don't hesitate to raise the questions. I will move along with the priorities of the call. I said in the introduction that the call are in line with 3 other priorities in the EU and 3 priorities also connected to the recovery post-COVID. The first one is the green recovery. So when filling the application form, you don't have to tick every priority. You can select only one of them. And so the first one is the green recovery. The challenge is that the COVID-19 crisis has hit the sector and stopped or reduced all the activities for several months. And while the climate crisis is one of the most important challenges ahead of us, many music actors are questioning their projects to restart in a more sustainable way. And in that framework, MusicAIRE will fund initiatives that either reduce the carbon footprint of their project or raise awareness and carry collective actions about green recovery. So there are examples of eligible activities, but these are just examples. You can also bring your own idea. It's not like it's not limited to this list of activities here, but we can think about like certification models or strategies to develop green policy in your own venues. It can be more about like workshop or peers learning, mentoring sessions on green strategies. It can be also advocacy actions towards local, national, or European governments. It can be new tools or models about touring or concert programming. There were, during the think tank sessions, a lot of proposals about the question of mobility, about slow touring, but also to reduce the audience footprint, or awareness raising action campaigns, or also measuring carbon footprint actions. So the scope is quite broad. The idea is not to limit the applicants, but more to bottom up the initiatives from the applicants to also promote to the EU what are the actions that request funding on the topic of green recovery. Next slide, please. The second, yeah, thank you. I see one question. I will take it right after that, after the priorities when we talk about eligibility. So digital recovery is the second priority under this call. And as a response to the pandemic, the music sector has developed its capacity to adapt and being flexible with digital solutions. But at the same time, it has posed some challenges regarding fair remuneration, data rights management, diversity, live streaming, and so on. So MusicAIRE will fund initiatives that adapt to new emerging trends in the digital music context, or they will pay special attention to digital responsibility and ethical aspects related to so, and also about the question of digital sobriety. So what kind of eligible activities can be? It can be about collecting information of best practice, capacity building, workshop, training modules, and so on, development of new strategies, development of fair streaming models, especially focusing on diversity, or strategies to reach out more digital audiences. And next slide, please. The last priority under this call is called Just and Resilient. So The crisis has been a way to realize how much people need culture and music in their daily lives, but also to connect with each other during the lockdowns, for instance. And on the other hand, because people might be reluctant to come back to music activities, and also some music professionals realized how big is the lack of recognition of their own job or about the music sector in general. MusicAIRE will fund initiatives that either highlight the social value of music practices and also guarantee fair working conditions and fair recognition in the music sector. So this topic, this priority is also quite broad, but as example of eligible activities, there can be either support to artists' careers through mentoring or training programs, actions to develop audience diversity and to engage audiences, awareness raising or advocacy on the value of music, of fair pay or fair practices, or any other action also promoting gender equality in the music sector. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the question of eligibility, I see a question in the chat. That is, can associations apply for grants for projects that include several members? Yes, it's possible. It's definitely possible. Just keep in mind that the budget is not so big. So if you redistribute these grants with other members, then the share of the budget that each one will get in the end might be quite small. But yes, it's absolutely possible. And another question is, does a funding application need to take all the 3 EU objectives into account? No, it can be only one. You can focus on green or focus on digitalization, or you can focus on just and resilience. So yeah, you can pick up your priority and not answer them all. I think it's actually quite difficult to apply with a project that would take the 3 priorities with the amount, with the budget amount available and with the calendar which is available. So I would rather advise to focus on 1 or 2 priorities. But of course, if you have a project that you think tick the 3 priorities, that's great. But it's just an advice. So in terms of eligibility to apply, you must be a music organization and you must have a legal entity. So it can be public or private, but no natural persons are eligible under this call. So you need a legal entity. And the rest of the eligibility criteria are actually quite the same as for Creative Europe programs, other programs. So for instance, in terms of countries, it's all the EU countries with some partnering countries. But basically, UK and Switzerland, for instance, are not eligible, unfortunately, on this call. Next slide, please. So, yeah, I'd like to get on this point of the European added value because this goal is mono-beneficiary. It means that you can apply on your own. You don't have to have partners for this goal. It's a way to make the administrative process more simple. It means that when you apply, you only have to give the administrative details about your organization only. However, it's important that the project has a European added value, which means it should be collaborative, or there should be ways to upscale or share about your project in a way. So it's possible and very welcome to work with partners on your project. It's just that you won't have to give the administrative details about your partners in the application, but it's good to have partners, and it's good to mention that you have partners. Keep in mind that then you will be the only financially liable organizations in the eye of the EU. So if you share a part of the budget with your partners, make sure you have a kind of formal agreement between you. And don't forget that the budget is also limited. So if you split the budget in equal share among your partners, each partner might get a small share of the budget. I think it's also better to start small. So you can work with 1 or 2 partners abroad already, and explain how you would expand your project on a larger scale in a further step. And it's also possible to rely on European networks, such as Live DMA, to disseminate your work across Europe. So you can apply on your own, and you can get in touch with me, for instance, and we can discuss how we can, for instance, share the results of your project to other venues or other festivals from our network. Next slide, please. I'm just checking. Is European value also added by contributing to those 3 objectives? Yes, in a way. I'm not sure what you mean here, but I mean, the 3 objectives are, I mean, you will have to answer how your project is in line with at least one of the priorities. And through this, you have to provide a project or solution on the European scale. So in a way, it's very connected. Is it possible to have partners that don't manage any budget? Yes, if you find partners who are willing to contribute on a volunteer basis on this project, it's absolutely possible. I mean, they won't control this part of your project, I guess. It's not an obligation to share the budget with your partners. Are there priorities concerning the audiences we will reach through the project? No, you can define your own target groups and the audience that you're thinking about with this project. So there's no focus on like I don't know, young people or kids. It's not like maybe you're referring to Erasmus, where often we have to target like young people through the project. But in this, with this called MusicAIRE, it's targeting the music sector. So as long as you're working in the music sphere, there's no eligibility question or priorities regarding the audiences. I think the question of the audience can be reflected upon either the question of green. I mentioned before the question on how we reduce the carbon footprint related to the audience, for instance. On digitalization, you can work on digital audiences, and on trust and resilience, it can be actions related to audience engagement. How do venues reconnect with audiences that are maybe not coming anymore to the venues during the COVID and so on? I'm checking the questions. So yeah, I mentioned it at the very beginning. I will send the slides to everybody who's following this webinar session. I think I will share them once the call is officially published, and I don't think we will send the video by email because it's quite a big file, but we will share it on our website and socials, and I think we will share the link with you. So if you work with a partner, do you need to name them in the application from the start on? What if you find a partner while the project is already running and the application is already done? Okay, so it won't be mandatory to name your partners when you apply, because it's true that it can take time to find the partners on the project, and the timeline with the call is quite short. So I think that you can explain that you will develop the project with this kind of partner and explain with the most of precision as possible what kind of partner you would like to work with, but also keep in mind that if you announce it in the application, you will have to do so at some point. And then, I mean, the project is also quite short in time. So I think it's better to start working on your project knowing who is your partner. Because if you start working on the project and you still don't know who is your partner, I think in terms of implementation, it may be complicated. And I will give more precisions about it when talking about how the projects will be evaluated. So no, it's not mandatory to give the exact name of your partners when you apply. But in terms of project management, I would really advise you to know exactly who is your partner when you apply. I'm trying to pop up. So timeline, I was not sure about the co-funding. It's mandatory. Okay, so about the percentage of the co-funding, it's not official yet. So I think it might be 10%, but it's not definitive. We'll know once the call is out. What is the timeline of the project, when to start and finish report? So it also depends when the call will be released, but you can expect to start the project with the first call in, I would say, before the summer, and for 10 to 12 months. So you have to send your report at the end of your project, and you usually have 2 months to do so, but we'll see once the call is published what's the exact timeline. But I think you can expect, like, for the call from February to start the project before the summer 2022. I don't know if there will be a deadline to start the project. Maybe the deadline will be December or something. So I would say you should start the project between spring and winter. Then you have from 10 to 12 months for your project, and then 2 months to report about it. But well, this is based on what we discussed in the think tank, and this is based on the way Creative Europe is usually working. But this will be known for sure once the call is released. So I think these are answers that I can give you more properly during the second session. We have already I've built a project of a bicycle stage. We're looking for muffins to create a job to make it tour. Would that be possible? Yeah, it sounds possible, and then it depends how you present your project and your application. But I think it's possible. Yes. If yes, hi. Do we have to answer the call in English? Yes, you do, because there's it's too complicated to manage such a call in all the EU languages. So on applications will only be in English, and the call will only be released in English. So before answering more questions, I will give you some more tips about the evaluation of the project. How is actually your project evaluated? And it's a tip that I would give you when applying to EU funding. You know, when the call is released, pay a lot of attention on how about the evaluation part, because it actually gives you tips on how you must write your project and answer the question of the application. You must write your application knowing the indicators of evaluation, so you know where to put the light on when writing about your project. Because in terms of EU funding, the jury is an external jury, and they are not looking at your artistic project. I mean, you are the expert on this, and they don't look at the cultural or artistic aspect of your project. The three main criteria to evaluate your project is the relevance to the priorities, the project management, and the impact of your project. So on relevance, for instance, you must explain what's the objective of your own project and how it answers the call priorities. You must also explain there what's the European added value of your project. So the question behind is, why does it make sense to grant your project more than any other project? Why does it make sense to grant your project regarding the priorities? And my advice here is go straight to the point. I mean, select the information, but go straight to the point. Don't be shy, because I'm sure you're very legitimate with your project. Here we are on a small funding scheme, so find the right balance between ambition and reality. And as I said, it's not about artistic relevance, but it's about your project relevance, and you have to make them believe in your idea. The second point of evaluation is project management. So on project management, here you should explain the activities of your project. So think about planning steps, tangible outcomes. Be as much clear, simple, and precise as possible. You should also indicate the timeline, and you must indicate how you will manage your own project. So what are your management tools? What are the tools you're working with? The question behind is, why is it safe for the EU to give you money for the project, and how to make sure you will use it in a good way? So I think here the content is important, but the way you present the content is also important, because this is the way you demonstrate of your organization skills. So don't hesitate to detail the management tools that you use, be precise, and you have to make them trust your idea at this point. And the last point of evaluation is the impact and dissemination. So here you should explain about your communication and dissemination strategy. So what is dissemination? Dissemination is the fact that your project has a kind of existence beyond the project. It's how you will, how others can get inspired by your project, or what will be the impact of your project on others. So how your project will contribute to the whole sector and who will benefit from it. Because as I said at the very beginning, this call is also made to test some pilot actions for a larger program. So it's important that the results of your project can be used or can be adapted to other organizations. So what are the takeaways? How will you evaluate your own project? And what, in your opinion, would make your project successful? You should kind of give indicators on this. So don't forget that your project can become a kind of role model and shape future music programs. And anticipating the results of your project is also anticipating the risks. So it can be important there to write something about the risk management. And really don't underestimate this part of the evaluation, because it's really important in the way the projects will be evaluated. So there's a question: if you apply in the first call but don't get selected, are you allowed to apply again for the same project in the second call? Yes, I think so. I think it's possible. Then of course I don't know how the jury will give you a feedback about your project, because usually in Creative Europe, if you get a kind of minimum point on your application, but if you're not successful because there were other projects that had more a better score than yours, you still receive quite long evaluation feedback where they explain where and why you were not selected. I don't know if that will be the case with MusicAIRE, because I don't know if they will have the capacity to do so, but I hope it will be possible, so you can work on your project and give it a second try. Next slide, please. So budget tips. Yeah, here, as I said, we'll work more on the budget maybe in the second session once the call is out and we have all the information. But first point is, what is a lump sum budget? This is the new way of EU funding since 2021. And it's a way to make the financial report easier. So basically, you submit a provisional budget, and if the budget is validated, and if you implement all the activities you said you would in the final report, and if you can prove it in a way, then you don't have to prove anything about the costs. You have to keep all the record and so on for you in case of an audit. But there are no reporting. There is no financial reporting based on real costs. It's a lump sum budget. So you announce a budget to implement these activities, and if you prove that you well implemented these activities, then you get the budget that you requested in the beginning. However, if you spend more than expected, MusicAIRE won't cover the extra costs, so you have to be quite realistic with the money that you request and that you will use. It's important to give numbers as close as possible to reality, because they can also validate your project, but suggest to reduce some costs in your budget. How do you create such a lump sum budget? Well, usually for the staff costs, we give a number of staff days and a staff allowance per day. And you should explain how it's in line with the national rules and labor laws. You can also give an allowance per travel and stay if there are some mobility costs in your project. So what we roughly use, but it's just an example, it's like 300 euros for travel, 100 euro per hotel night, and like 50 euro for the daily meals, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are some EU documents that give you like the maximum amount that you can't spend for per travel and per stay. And for external services, you should explain how many cost estimations you will make and indicate what are your selection criteria when working with external services. So every choice is possible as long as you can justify and make it meaningful in your project. So for instance, if you're working with external services, it's not just about the price and that you will select the cheapest one, especially, for instance, if you want to work with ecological labels and so on. It can be also part of your selection criteria, but you have to explain it. You can also explain that on mobility, you will support slow travel and travel by train, which is sometimes more expensive, and this is why you put more cost on your mobility. So I mean, it's just you can do whatever you want, as long as it makes sense and that you can justify and prove it. I think there will be no indirect costs through MusicAIRE, but this is something we can confirm once the call is out, which means that you can't pay for your electricity bills or rent with this funding. And I will also double check before the next session, what about invoicing outside eligible Creative Europe countries? So for instance, we, in terms of eligibility, UK is not eligible to apply. But if you're buying something like, I don't know, merchandise or whatever in the UK, is the invoice eligible? This is a different thing that I have to double check and let you know next time we meet. I think I've covered some of the main points here. So yeah, next slide, please. Please let me know if you have more questions at this point. Let us know also if you would need something else from Live DMA at this point. I mean, we organized this info session. I will send you the slides and the recording will be available and so on. But if you need anything else like partner search or spreading the word about your project or support to disseminate your project, please also get in touch with me. And yeah, I would also be very interested to know if you already have a project idea, what it is, and how do you feel about the call? Do you think it's accessible, or what is a bit challenging in this call for you? What about the artistic costs? It's something where I hope we'll have more information once the call is released on the eligibility of the costs. I don't have much more information about that at the moment. And I can't remember exactly how it was under Creative Europe, so it's something I have to double check. Is this an annual call? No, it's it's one in the life call. There will be one call in February, probably another call like around September, and then that's it. So hopefully they will receive like hundreds of applications and great projects, so we can advocate to the EU that we need more of these kind of funding schemes, and that we need to develop it in the future and have more calls. But for the moment, there's only 2.2 million to redistribute through 2 calls, one in February and one in September 2022, and that's it. Are there criteria to set small or medium or big projects? No, I think it's up to you to decide regarding your project, but there's no, I don't think there will be criteria in the call to force you to choose up on the budget. It depends on your budget. I will write my also email address in the chat, so you can have it if you want to send a message later. You can also check on the website, there's the contact page, but here is my email address. Can a related township venue apply? Yes, it's public organizations are eligible. So can be either public or private non-profit or private commercial. I think it's important that you don't make any profits out of the project, but you can be a profitable company. Yes, the recording file of this webinar will be available once the call is out. So hopefully in the upcoming days, we will upload it on our website and on our social medias. And I think we will send you the link to access to the recording file. I will leave the chat open for 2 or 3 more minutes if you have questions. I hope this was clear enough. And for the second session, I think we will go through briefly the main points in the application, but we will focus on more like technical aspects. But in the meanwhile, if you already have a project idea, but still wondering in which way it can be eligible or not, don't hesitate to send me the pitch of your idea by email. And so that I think that, of course, it's quite a competitive call, so I won't tell everybody about your project, but I think that if we can work somehow on concrete examples, it can help to work on your application. So don't hesitate to send me your ideas, and I will try to make a kind of summary or to create some guidelines from it, so we can work from something and not only from the application, which can seem a bit theoretical, but from concrete projects and ideas. Well, I think we're good. So thank you very much. I really, really hope that it will be an opportunity for you. I know that this is a quite limited opportunity in terms of budget and deadlines and so on, but I truly believe that it's important that you also apply to show that there's an interest and that there are needs from the sector for such funding, so that we can also advocate for more opportunities in the future. So yeah, okay, very welcome to read more about the Club Circle idea. Have a great day, and hopefully see you soon. Enjoy, and bye-bye.